Robert Campanaro. I had him on a video once before where he was talking about scientific evidence of God. And that discussion prompted me to wonder why. Well, I always wonder why people believe the things that they do, but in specific, why does Robert Campanaro believe the way that he does? So I just want to see if we can get to that. Can you explain how you came to your position, why you hold this belief, or why you would want to believe something like this?
Something like the existence of God, something like there's scientific evidence for God's existence. Which exactly?
Well, I don't see wanting to believe in something like scientific evidence for God. That doesn't really make any sense. I mean, anytime I demand scientific evidence of God, the theologians in the audience, give me a ration of shit because they say, well, God is a oh, what is it? He's transcendent and this is a subject of metaphysics. And how dare you try to ask for us to back up what we're saying? So that's the theological argument. And then you come along and you say that you've got scientific evidence for God, which of course you don't. And if you did, then that would be worldwide news, and somebody would have won the Nobel Prize for that. I mean, it would be the biggest discovery of all time.
Wouldn't it depend on your definition of science, though? If you just have a narrow definition of science, well, yeah.
Well, what do you think science is?
Well, I think anything that's testable and repeatable would qualify as a scientific theory.
Well, we could also call that a definition of evidence. I mean, scientific theory is a much stricter and definition than what you're talking about there. I mean, a scientific theory,
right? It's the closest thing to a fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it is a fact. Every modern scientific theory is also a body of facts. I mean, atomic theory, you can't just say it's just a theory. That's definitely a fact. Atoms are in fact a fact. The germ theory of disease, again, we know that germs cause disease. Evolution, not just documented, but it's something that is reproducible. It is repeatable, and we can have predictable experiments where we can actually chart evolution, and even in some cases, even replicate evolutionary steps that organisms have taken.
Okay, all right.
So all of these are facts, and science, though, is a process of analyzing nature. And I wish I had a succinct definition for what science is, but I mean, it is an objective means of evaluating and determining, the processes and properties of the natural world.
Right. Okay. I'll go along with that. So I can either respond to that or your original question: why do I come to the conclusions that I come? Was that the question?
Yeah. If you were not always a believer, I mean, most people are they just adopt whatever religion their parents have, and they don't put any questions in their minds about it, which they really should. I mean, nobody should identify as belonging to any religion just because their parents did.
Yeah. I was raised a Catholic. Okay. Right. So you could say I was raised in the Christian faith. I did not always believe what I believed, though. I believed in some form of Roman Catholicism. It was only later, around age 17, that I came to believe what I believe now.
What distinguishes what you believe now from what you believed before?
I was always told that Jesus died for your sins. Whatever that meant. I had no idea what that meant, and they didn't explain it to me.
I still don't know what that means, and I've had buckets of people explaining it to me.
All it means is Jesus died to pay for your sins. He died in your place. He suffered the wrath of God, and he was the scapegoat. Yeah.
Right. So that's already a fallacy. So that's right away you have the biggest problem. And this was, in fact, the problem that I had with Christianity the first time it was explained to me when I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
When they told me that Jesus had to die. Why? Well, we had to kill him in order for God to forgive. Why? That doesn't make any sense. God can do whatever he wants. He can forgive us whatever why would he need a sacrifice? That's stupid. And that remains my answer today. From 5 years old to now, that's still the answer.
It all depends on what you mean by forgive, whether he needed to offer a sacrifice in order to forgive us. I think he forgave us way before he sent Christ.
Okay, so there was no reason for the Christ thing at all.
He needed to pay the price for sin.
There was no price.
Forgiveness is one thing.
There's no price.
Well, he says there is.
Well, no, people who pretend to talk for God say that there is. But God doesn't say anything. People pretend to talk for God, and people write books full of fallacies that pretend to talk for God. And they've got lots of different holy books.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that?
I'm quite aware of that.
But
have
you ever read any of them?
What's that?
Have you ever read any of the other holy books?
A little bit of the Quran, but that's not.
Wow. Yeah, that's not a good starting source. The first one I read was the Bhagavad-Gita.
Okay.
And the Bhagavad-Gita, I think, is a good one because it's so much older than Christianity. It's contextually, it is at bare minimum 600 years before Christianity, at the very least.
That's fine. That's fine. It doesn't, for me.
That's contextual. But according to the things that it's claiming, the Bhagavad-Gita is supposed to have taken place something like 5,000 years ago. But it does make references in there that, and the important thing is that Krishna makes some of the same claims and does some of the same things that Jesus does. And decades ago, when I was reading Dionysus for just studying in college for comparative mythology, and I noticed that Dionysus calls himself the vine and the fruit of the vine, and he's using all of these terms that are supposed to be specifically to Jesus. Yet the story about Dionysus was at bare minimum, again, at least 500 years older than Jesus.
Okay.
So my thought was, why would God create his son to be a duplicate, a sequel of a human idea? I mean, either Dionysus really could turn water into wine, or Jesus couldn't either.
I would reject that theory.
Reject what theory?
That God created his son to be a copy of somebody else.
Well, then how do you explain it?
Well, I mean, how do you explain all the similarities between JFK and Abraham Lincoln? I mean, there's some stark similarities between them, and I had a list, but I don't have it on me.
Yeah, I've seen the list.
Okay,
I've seen the list, and yeah, we can find an awful lot of things like that. Comparative, coincidences in a lot of different things. We can, if we get really paranoid, we can draw all kinds of lines between lines, but to connect all sorts of other things. It's amazing the sort of patterns that the mind can pick up that aren't really there. That's where constellations come from.
What's that?
I'm saying that people
I'm sorry.
They'll connect dots that don't need to be connected, and they'll think that there's a correlation there, and that's how we imagined constellations, for example.
Okay, all right, and that's why I would say that there's no connection between Jesus and who was it that claimed to be divine?
Well, name it. There was lots of half-human God men before Jesus.
Jesus was not half human, half God. Jesus was totally God, totally man.
Yeah, I'm aware of the apologetics and.
Okay, well, I mean that's all right, but we have to define.
But it's still the same thing. It's still Mary was not divine, right?
No,
God was not human. Okay, so half human. There you go.
No.
Just like Zeus, just like Hercules, just like a number of others. And then there were some that were crucified. Prometheus, for example, was crucified for the sins of man. And his crucifixion was much worse than Jesus's crucifixion, because Prometheus was crucified for 10,000 years, where he was strapped out to a rock, and because he's a god, he can't die.
Okay, so, and there's historical evidence for that.
Exactly as much as there is for Jesus.
No. Look, this can get off into a discussion that we don't want to go down, because you said you can't be on here for a long time today. We can have that discussion later. But I would definitely there's
what we have is a story about a guy.
Amount of historical evidence.
We don't have historical evidence for Jesus. We don't have historical evidence for Prometheus. We don't have historical evidence for Krishna.
No, we do. We do.
No, we actually don't. But you're right. That's going to be another.
Tacitus mentions Jesus.
Yeah, in what 116, CE. And what he doesn't mention Jesus. He mentions Christians burning down Rome because Nero blamed the Christians. So we're not arguing whether Christianity existed.
Right.
We were talking about whether there's historical evidence of Jesus. And so we would need to get historical writings from the 1st century, not the 2nd.
Okay, we have them.
You have one forgery attributed to Josephus that we know that Josephus didn't actually write.
Well, there were some interpolations, but
let's pretend for a moment. Let's pretend for a moment.
Wait, hold it.
I'm just going to cut it to the base. Let's pretend for a moment that there was a Jesus. That we proved that there was a Jesus, and that it wasn't a compilation of a bunch of different guys. There was one guy on which all of these myths and legends were based. Okay, let's pretend we've got a Jesus. All right, and we can equally assume that there was a historical basis for Hercules and for Dionysus and for several others, maybe not all.
No. There's no historical basis for that.
Krishna is considered by 800 million Hindus. Krishna is considered to be a historical person.
Can we trace it? Does scholarship trace anything back to Krishna?
The same as doesn't for Jesus, yeah.
Huh?
It doesn't for Jesus either.
It does. It most certainly does.
No,
you're
again. If we had evidence that there was a historical Jesus, your position would not be on any better ground. We would still have all of the stories attributed to him have already occurred in the hands of other gods, have already been attributed to other gods. There's nothing Jesus did.
But if the
nothing Jesus did that was original to that story. So what you're saying,
it doesn't matter if the story of Christ stands on its own historical merits. Then it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
It does. It does.
It doesn't have historical merits. We've already said that the only thing
you're way outside the mainstream of New Testament critical scholarship. Then that's all I can tell you. That's all I can tell you.
What is all you can tell me?
That you're way outside the mainstream of scholarship when you say that there's no.
I am not actually. I can accept. No. If you want, as I said, we can take for granted that we have historical proof of Jesus. We don't. And scholars in New Testament agree. Scholars in New Testament agree. We don't have any historical evidence of Jesus, but it doesn't matter. Let's just say we did. Your position is still not on any better ground. Why would it be? The story of Jesus and why he had to be sacrificed. We know that. We already know that was a scapegoat fallacy. So we don't that's invalid right there. We also know that it wasn't a virgin birth. We know that not only was that copied from a bunch of gods, but it was also a mistranslation of the word for unmarried maiden. There's nothing in the story of Jesus that actually makes sense
to you.
Okay. There's nothing in the historical Jesus story that makes sense to me. Obviously, somehow it makes sense to you. Why?
How do I answer that? It makes sense to me.
I can explain the things that I hold to be true, why I hold them to be true. I can give you the evidence that indicates those things. It's never a feeling. It will never, ever be just something I feel.
Well, I'm not reducing it to a feeling. I told you there is historical evidence that we can trace the story of Christ that's talked about in the narratives and in the Gospels. We can trace that back through history. Scholarship.
And I already said that we can't, but
I understand.
Even if we could.
But I'm saying we can, and whoever watches this video is just going to have to do their own research.
Okay. Let's pretend for a minute that you can. And I already know the scholarship says that you can't, but that's okay. We'll just let that go.
Okay.
Even if you could find the whacked out first century faith healer who lied to all his followers and pretended to heal things he couldn't heal, and who didn't know when the fruiting season for the fig tree was.
I'm not going to grant any of that.
And he couldn't even. He knew that he couldn't pull his shtick in his own hometown. That's why he said that that what is it called? Medics or doctors or whatever he called himself. Physicians. That's what it was. Which. Furthest thing from the truth. He says that they get no respect in their own hometown.
Yeah,
because the people knew him. They knew he was full of crap. So you've got a first century faith healer who is taking money from other people to support, I don't know, the poor, which kind of sounds like every faith healer we've got today, doesn't it? And then they end up running a boys' home in Barbados that doesn't actually exist.
Well, I know Jesus said foxes have holes, birds of the air have their nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So he didn't have as much money as apparently you think.
I'm not saying that he was rich. I'm saying he was taking other people's money. He was supposedly a carpenter.
And doing what with it?
Carpentry. He didn't earn his living that way. He was a faith healer. And by faith healer, I mean somebody who attributes diseases to demons, and then he's going to cast out those demons to heal them.
Yeah.
That's pretty dangerous. So there's nothing Jesus ever said.
He also opened blind eyes, healed the deaf.
And failed in an attempt. But did he also make midgets grow and make one leg longer or shorter than the other?
No.
Faith healers do that.
No, he didn't do anything like that as far as I know.
He
raised people, according to the biblical narrative, he raised people. I'm sorry?
You make crippled people come up on stage and get out of their wheelchairs and then walk around. Yeah, because I know modern faith healers do that too. So they do every trick that Jesus did except for the turn water into wine.
Jesus told one guy, he said, he healed him, and he said, don't say anything to this about this to anybody. Just go and offer the gift that Moses commanded you. Don't say anything. And the guy turned around and he went and reported what he saw. Okay. So
what do you mean? So no. So yes.
So no. So
clarifying what I'm saying.
So you can't compare Jesus to a faith healer.
He is a faith healer. That's what he was.
He's the only faith healer I know that said, "Don't tell anybody I just did this for you. Just go offer the sacrifice that Moses commanded you."
Yeah, Bobby Tilton. I mean, come on.
Told people to don't tell anybody what I just did.
A lot of these faith healers will.
Wait. Yes or no?
I don't know which person said don't tell anyone.
Okay.
But I know that exact story was attributed to one of them, and I think it was Bobby Tilton. Bobby Tilton had this reputation about him, and he had such a following. He was here in Dallas, where I live, and I remember when Bobby Tilton he was dragged into court in Austin, and literal bus loads of his followers went down to defend him, or to at least witness how he was, be supportive of him, and they were terrified and shocked when he turned his church into the first ever for-profit church that night before, which got him out of all of those embezzlement charges.
Yeah.
And now he's got what, 100 or so followers that have come in on all these school buses, and they've just seen how he's done this, and that means he's guilty.
Arn, it's a fair question whether you can't stand these people more than I do, or I can't stand these people more than you do.
What are you talking about?
Well, you don't think I support Tilton and Copeland and
you admit that they're all desperately dishonest, and we also know that people go to them and give them literally tens of millions of dollars a year.
Yes, they do.
Tens of millions.
Yeah.
Of dollars a year. And what do they do? What do they actually faith heal? They claim to cure cancer. Tilton.
They don't heal a thing. They don't heal a thing.
Yeah, well, neither did Jesus. So if we imagine that there was a historical Jesus, we've got this first century faith healer.
You can't.
He does. Why can't I say that? It's what's in the
you
Bible.
can if you want, but you can't prove it. You can't back it up.
I can show it in the Bible. That's what's happening in the Bible.
No,
we have a story about a first century faith healer. He is a faith healer by every definition.
He healed.
He cast out demons to heal people. Jesus had no concept. Jesus had no idea what the causes were for any actual disease. He didn't know. He thought it was caused by witchcraft or demons.
Okay,
that's if we assume that there was a single guy.
That assertion is unsubstantiated.
Let me just finish this one sentence. That's if we assume that there was a single guy responsible for the entire Jesus legend. I don't think so. I think the Jesus legend was a compilation of different people, both multiple fictional people and multiple real people. I don't think that there was ever one guy that you could find. If you had a time machine, you wouldn't be able to find the one and only guy who is Jesus. If you found somebody from history and brought him back through time, that guy would not watch Jesus Christ Superstar and recognize that it is a story about him. That's the information that I've seen implies that what you have with Jesus is something similar to what you have with King Arthur or with Robin Hood, where the story has been so embellished and mixed with other people's stories that there's not one core person in it anymore. I've heard Christians claim Jesus of Damnius and Jesus ben Ananias were both the Jesus that they were talking about, that they believe in, even though we know that neither one of them was. Okay. So we know how these stories can get blended together. And that's what I think happened. I mean, that's what the indications are. I'm totally open to the fact that we had some absolute know-nothing zealot first century faith healer who believed in demons and told people that it not to wash their hands because he defied Jewish tradition, and that he didn't know that the things that you take into your mouth can actually defile you. He believed in magic words, that there was things that come out of your mouth that would defile you. So let's just
because they came out of the heart. Because they came out of the heart.
Nothing comes out of the heart except blood.
Not the physical heart, the heart, the inner part of man.
What would it matter?
What he believes and what he thinks, and
what would it matter
about? That's the heart of man. That's what it. Okay. That's what our words come out.
What if it matter? What does it matter where the words come from? Whether they come from malice or whether they come from altruism? What does it matter?
Because it indicates the condition of the heart.
Again,
the condition of the heart.
Okay, what is the condition of the heart?
Well, it's either redeemed or it's not.
That's dichotomy.
And if it's redeemed,
then it's realize that nobody ever is all the way on this side and all the way on this side.
Right.
Everything is a bell curve, right? So most of us are somewhere down here in the middle, and you've got to be really extreme to be on either end of that. Okay, and so nobody's at the absolute ends. But way too many believers that I talk to, like yourself, believe that everybody is at either extreme, and then nobody's in the middle.
Oh, I thought we were talking about what would come out of an individual's mouth.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the words don't have power. There's no such thing as magic words.
Certainly, I agree. Words don't have power.
What have we been arguing about for the last 5 minutes? What difference does it make what comes out of a man's mouth does not defile him? That doesn't make any sense.
I know. Okay, I see what you're saying. It defiles him because of what I said, and I guess you're not making the connection, but I see the connection. It defiles him because it shows the condition of the heart.
That makes no sense.
What's that?
The condition of the heart, whatever that. What does the condition of the heart mean?
I just said the condition.
Okay, you gave a dichotomous position, either redeemed or not, right? Yeah. And we already established that everybody is in a bell curve, so they're not either extreme. And you just said that everybody's at either extreme. So none of that makes any sense, even by your own description.
No, it reveals the condition of the heart. If the man is redeemed,
it's not dichotomous.
It's speech. What's that?
It's not dichotomous. You can't find one person on this planet who is redeemed and point out another man that is not redeemed, because there's not a dichotomous situation. Everybody has malice in them. Everybody has kind-hearted moments in them. Everybody is a blend. We're all in a bell curve.
By redeemed, I'm not talking about perfected. I'm talking about who's in a proper relationship with God through faith in Christ. That's what I mean by
regardless, and excluding for the moment that faith is the most dishonest and auto-deceptive position that a person can even hold, excluding that for a moment, it doesn't matter what the condition of the heart is. It doesn't mean that anything that comes out of the mouth will defile him, nor does it have anything at all to do with the fact that things that he takes into his mouth will defile him, like diseases and drugs and poisons and malnutrition and sharp glass and other things like that.
All right. And Jesus didn't say it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you in an absolute sense. Like, you can take poison and that's not going to hurt you. You can eat glass.
He set up a false dichotomy of a thing that already wasn't real. Right? The premise is already false, but then the conclusion is false too. That what comes out of your mouth defiles you. No, under no circumstance does what comes out of your mouth defile you. Doesn't matter what the condition of your heart is. It doesn't defile you. Period. Ever.
According to the Bible, we will be our words will condemn us, and our words will acquit us. So that's what he's talking about.
That's if that is talking about a slightly different thing. Now we're talking about something about whether there's value in truth, perhaps, right? Whether we're going to be honest with ourselves, which I got to say, having argued with religious believers for so many years, I have not seen a lot of honesty on your side. I have to be completely blunt about that. Fraud, falsehoods, and fallacies is what your belief system is entirely based on. There is not a word of truth to it, meaning that no religion, not just Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism or whatever, none of them, although they all claim absolute truth and although they all claim scientific evidence, and yes, they really do, none of them can actually show the truth of their beliefs at all. It all comes down to faith.
So then God created the world, but yet he gave no revelation of himself.
We have all kinds of revelation from the Avestas of Zarathustra, for example.
But he gave no definitive revelation.
Apparently not. How many different religions do we have that have no common core? Look at Zarathustra, for example. Well, look at the worship of Amun-Ra, for example, which has parallels with the worship of your God, which is why I changed my name to that, for anybody that's curious. And the oldest religion in continuous practice, if not the Yazidis, then that would be the Hindu, right? They're supposed to be, the Rig Veda is like the oldest of all the holy books.
Okay.
Well, so we have lots of revelations, but every revelation is something a guy wrote down.
Okay.
And then pretended that God inspired him. Either because he was on drugs or had a fever dream, whatever, but it was God that inspired him to write whatever he did. And none of them.
So then your position is that not that you believe in a God, but if there is a God, then I do. I believe that there's a God. So what I'm to take out of this discussion is that the God that I believe in has not revealed himself in a way that I could that I could show through evidence that this is his revelation.
If your God were real, then I would say that you should have we should have evidence of it, even if it is metaphysical. There would still be a way to show that your God was real. That faith would not be required. That one of the items of evidence that we have against God is the fact that faith is required.
Okay, and how are you defining faith?
Faith is a belief that is not based on scientific evidence, meaning that it was not inspired by scientific evidence, and we know that most people believe what they do because they were raised in that belief or because they admit that they have emotional reasons for that. The most revealing thing that I've gotten out of that is talking to people who were once, that I can confirm actually were once atheists, not liars like Kirk Cameron who pretend to be atheists, but they actually believed in God, but people who actually were atheist activists at one time. And we can show documentation. This person was an atheist and then suddenly they were a Christian. Why? And I've interviewed a number of these people, and the best answer, honestly, the best answer I got was, I just wanted to believe that. Not kidding. I just wanted to believe that.
Well, you need to get out more, Aaron.
You don't think I get out enough?
Huh?
You don't think I get out enough? How did you?
That's the best answer. That's the best answer you got.
Yeah, that was. And I bet you can't get me a better one.
Well, I think I've already given you a better one. I told you that scholarship will trace the roots of the Christian faith all the way back to at least within 6
already months. We've covered how that is not the case.
Well,
no, even if it was, even if it was the case, even if what you were saying is right, we know it's wrong, but if what you said was right, you'd still be in the same position. You're worshiping a faith healer who, at best, some radical faith healer ran some ridiculous little cult, was taking people's money, and he was making all these promises that violated both the Jewish establishment at that time, which even you will admit, and of course the Romans. So they killed him. Let's pretend that we have one guy who was at the core of every one of these legends. Maybe not all of the 16 gospels that didn't make it into the gospel, but just the 4 that we kept that are obviously copying from each other, except for John, which is like way out of left field. But anyway, regardless, if we pretend that there's a single historical character, then you are worshiping a 1st century Bobby Tilton.
All right. Okay. You made a number of assertions there that I'm not going to address, but that
I don't even think you could list them. I don't think I've made any assertions.
You
I
did.
said one thing.
You said all the Gospels were copies of each other except for John.
You're right. I mean, Matthew and Mark, right? There's copying going on there. Luke appears to have actually
not copying. They weren't slavish copies. Again, you need.
No, they weren't slavish copies. I'll grant you that, because they have their own deviations.
They have their own. They have their own perspective. They have
and Luke, from my limited understanding, and I completely admit this, Luke might actually have been written by Luke.
Yes,
but not Mark or Matthew or John. And then Luke has some strange parallels with Josephus himself, which makes it sound like Luke and Josephus were both witnessing the same event from two different angles and writing about each other.
Okay, again, I would dispute whether Matthew, Mark, and John did not write their Gospels.
Okay, so let's pretend that they did. Let's pretend that the Gospel of John, even though that I can't even pretend that the Gospel of John was written by the Apostle John. I can't even pretend that. But let's assume that Matthew, Mark, and Luke were all written by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And let's pretend that they all knew the one and only actual character, historic character behind the ultimately, you still worship a first century Bobby Tilton.
I disagree.
You're granted. You're welcome to disagree.
But there's no evidence that Jesus was fleecing people. There's no evidence that Jesus was rich. Jesus said, "I am not rich."
There's no evidence of Jesus. There's no evidence of Jesus, so we're done. It doesn't matter. Jesus becomes an opinion.
All right, and okay. I said scholarship can trace.
I know that you said something that was false. Yes, I get it, and I'm willing to override that. It would just walk past it.
How many scholars? Of course, I don't have them on hand. But how many?
Okay, what if you want to argue that there's historical evidence of Jesus, and that is not the purpose of this discussion?
Right.
If you want to take it in that other discussion, if you want to take it in that other direction, you can take it in that other direction. But I would be happy to follow you down that rabbit hole. But I want to find out why you believe, or what appeals to you about this belief.
About the Christian belief?
Yes. I can't, because for me, it has no appeal at all. As a matter of fact, I mean, when I was still a believer, when I believed in your God, I couldn't find any solace in that.
You were a believer.
Of course.
I didn't know that. I didn't
Almost every American atheist was raised Christian.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
I can tell you this. I can tell you that there was a poll, and I wish they would do another one, because I can't remember. And I can't find where this poll was. I just remember that I read all these people that were submitting their answers as to in American atheists, meaning not members of American atheists, but atheists raised in America, that they were raised Christian. Of those that were raised Christian, what changed their belief system? The tertiary answer, surprisingly, was science, which I would have thought should have been the first answer, right? The secondary answer, what changed their belief, what convinced them that Christianity was false, was the hypocrisy of the church. Okay, grant that's pretty impressive. The number one reason for why atheists raised as Christians in America lost their faith, the number one reason given was they read the Bible.
Okay. I read the Bible, and it only confirms. I'm
sure. Yeah. But Penn Jillette, who have a lot of differences with, and we won't even speak when we're in the same room, which is kind of sad. But he made a especially profound statement. He wanted everybody to read the Bible cover to cover, because he said we need more atheists, and nothing will create atheists faster than reading the damn Bible.
Well,
and Isaac Asimov said something very similar, that properly read.
It didn't work for my pastor, and it didn't work for the rest of the guys in my church.
I understand. Are you aware that I did a series, or I'm still doing a series on lessons on the Quran?
I'm not, no.
Okay. I had a Quranic, I'm sorry, and I had an Islamic apologist on to explain the value of his belief system. And he had kind of the same impression. He said that he could give the Quran to, he works in prisons, which is really disturbing to me. He works in prisons and he gives the Quran to prisoners, and the prisoners just read the Quran and they just believe it without knowing even what it says. Now, I had to show to this guy that nobody reads the Quran. Nobody raised in the United States, especially from a Christian background, nobody reads the Quran and just knows what it says. You have to compare it to the tafsirs and the hadiths. So you have to have people who were raised in the Islamic traditions to tell you what these interpretations even mean. When I do my study, I have to read 4 different Qurans at once. I have to read 4 different translations because I'm limited to English, unfortunately. Because,
well, there's only supposed to be one. There's only the one that Uthman supposedly created his own, and then he burned all the rest. So there really is only one.
There's only one Quran?
What's that?
There's only one Quran?
There's only one Quran. There should be. I don't know where.
Well, it's in Arabic. All of them are in Arabic, right? I mean, it's supposed to. Oh, I'm sorry, I just said all of them, which makes no sense. The ones that I read. Excuse me. We just adopted a polar bear a couple of days ago.
Cool.
If you hear pandemonium, it is because our polar bear is chasing the cats.
Excellent.
Falcor! Sorry,
that's why you got to get yourself a cat.
Oh, we have 2 cats.
Yeah.
And a polar bear.
I have about 7.
Yeah, we just adopted. You bad dog. I'm sorry. We just adopted a Great Pyrenees. And he's really young.
Don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's a huge.
I imagine it's going to get big though.
Yeah, he's roughly, let's say 90 pounds, 90 to 100 pound dog.
As big as a mastiff.
Virtually, they're very, very close.
Okay,
the Pyrenees is one of the big ones. It's not as big as an Akbash, and Akbash look very similar. So, as a matter of fact, if you were to cross a Pyrenees with a mastiff, you would get an Akbash. But that's not literally correct. I'm just saying in their appearance.
Yeah.
I don't want to be taken out of context there. Anyway, I forgot where I was. I'm sorry, because I had this huge 80-pound dog chasing a cat through my hallway that was literally knocking furniture over.
Hey, yeah. Well, 7 cats will do that too.
You have 7 cats.
I believe the number is 7. Yeah.
Ouch. Okay, we have 2. They're both rescues. Yeah, we have we have 3 dogs, all rescues, and then we have a parrot, and amazingly, the parrot gets along with everybody more or less. And we have a Australian dragon. What is it? The desert dragon. My wife will hate me for not remembering. Bearded dragon.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of my wife. My wife loves that lizard.
Do you let the parrot out of the cage?
Yeah, I even take him with me places, and he has. I'm really looking forward to a harness. I need to get a harness for him because we went to a restaurant a week or 2 ago, and he. I walked out of the car. I was walking into the restaurant. It was one of these outdoor restaurants, and I thought that the bird would be fine there. And I turned around too fast, and the bird flew off. And I realized that, this is a problem when you have a parrot that you don't clip the wings and they can fly. It means I'm going to have to climb up something to get him down. Yeah, but I do frequently take him out every day. He's out of the cage on demand. He'll start calling me to come let him out of the cage, and I'll take him out of the cage. Yeah,
they're very social animals, and that's one thing people don't. Well, it's not intuitive. But
I know this is completely off topic, but I got to say that the last parrot I had was a what was it? Conure. I had a sun conure. Somebody had this sun conure in their house, in a cage for 5 years. For 5 years, they had a sun conure they never interacted with.
And it probably went crazy, right?
You think? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had that bird for 11 years. The first thing I said when I found out that they were giving this bird away because they didn't know what to do with it, I went to, and the first thing I asked was, can I take it out of the cage? And they looked at me aghast. Why would you take a bird out of a cage? Which, of course, Mango, which I ended up naming it, it didn't have a name before. It had never interacted with people before. It took me like 3 years to hand tame this bird.
Huh.
Yeah, and I had it for 11 years, and he was out, or she, eventually we found out. Nobody had ever sexed it before. But after 5 or 6 years, which amazes me, the bird laid eggs. How could you be that old already and then just put off gestation to not? But anyway, Mango turned out to be female. I had her for 11 years, and I absolutely love that bird. And she was out of the cage every day. And I never, ever clipped her wings.
Huh.
And it's much the same with Max. So I take him out. I've taken him to a number of different places, and I just have to trust that I'm not going to move too quick, or I'm not going to overstep his duration of time that he gets antsy and might fly off. So, I mean, I've taken him into the grocery store a couple of times.
Why don't you clip the wings?
What's that?
Why don't you clip the wings?
It just seems wrong.
It might be. I know. I will not declaw my cats because
declawing cats is objectively wrong.
Yeah, yeah. It's like cutting off the tip of somebody's fingers.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I don't mean to be this way, but I do want to get it back on topic, and I'm actually glad we had this little bit of interlude. But you understand the reasons. I don't know if you understand the reasons that I don't believe as you do, but I mean, I still want to hear why you believe as you do.
Okay, as strong as I believe the historical evidence is for Jesus, I believe the evidence for the existence of God is. I think it's irrefutable.
Okay, well, as all of that has already been refuted, and you must be aware of that by now. That we can call it irrefutable. It wonders why don't we just state that God is a known fact in science?
I believe he could be. He could
but
be.
He isn't.
But
he's not.
If we.
And specifically, we have a majority of biologists and geologists who have no belief in God at all.
Yeah, and we have a lot of them that do believe in God.
So you might have a lot of them, and I'll grant you're roughly a third of the Earth and life scientists do believe in God for whatever reason, but it's never a scientific reason. Not one of them can show a scientific reason.
Again, it depends on how you're going to define science. If you define it narrowly,
what you imagine to be scientific evidence of God.
What's that?
You think that there are people out there who have scientific evidence of God. I'm saying
I believe I do have scientific evidence for God.
Okay, I just want to clarify that when the phlogiston theory was disproved, we know the name of the guy who disproved it in what year with what experiment, right? We know that when Einstein's theory was vindicated twice, in 1916 and then 100 years later, right? There was two different ways that we could in a colloquial sense, we can say that theory has been proved. It's still a theory, but it was vindicated by predicted evidence. So we can name when these things happen. We can name what that evidence is. But we don't have that, obviously, for God. God is still a faith-based belief. And you're going to tell me that it's not. You're going to tell me it's based on science. Which it can't be. And you already know it can't be.
Well, okay, let's talk about that and see where we go. I'll give you a simple deductive argument. Okay.
Do you have evidence? Do you understand that there's a difference between arguments and evidence?
Argument and evidence, yes.
Okay, so
yes.
There's arguments and then there's evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, so I asked for evidence. You're going to give me an argument.
Yeah, well, no, there's overlap. The argument isn't the exact same.
Give me what you got.
There's overlap between the two.
Okay, give me what you got.
All right. Simple deductive argument. From our uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning, information derives exclusively from intelligence. DNA is
this discussion before. We've had all of this discussion before, and somehow you haven't improved your position on it at all. You have to use a very loose definition of information if you're
Okay.
going to include.
All right. Yeah. Let me define information, because we do have to define that. Information. I don't know how much you know about information theory. I'm not.
I think we're going to repeat the conversation we already had before.
What's that?
And that didn't go anywhere. Where you tried to take the chemical signature in DNA and transfer that into intelligently designed information, and we already established that did not work. And you're going to use
no, we didn't.
argument.
Well, you see, that's the thing. I never made the case. I never defended the position. I just
okay, but that's what you just said. You just said that information, and earlier in our previous conversation, you said that information your definition would include DNA, and you said we know that information by this definition only comes from a mind, but we know
right.
that DNA does not come from a mind, and not only does it not come from a mind, but it cannot come from a mind.
Okay, you're talking about there's a difference between DNA and the information in DNA.
All right, we've already covered this.
No, we didn't.
Oh, we absolutely did. I've got links below from the previous conversation where we absolutely did cover all of this exact topic. Yes, where you tried to argue that DNA qualifies as information that only comes from a mind, and I already said that information, by that definition, what you call information in DNA does not come from a mind, cannot come from a mind. Understand? Cannot come from a mind.
Why?
There's not even a possibility that can come from a mind.
Why? Yeah.
In order, as we said before in the previous conversation, and I think that there are a lot of believers that I talk to seem to have this learning difficulty. In order to say, honestly, whether something is possible, we have to show a precedent or a parallel or a verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists.
Yes.
You don't have any of that.
That's all I have. That's all I have, Arn.
All you have is nothing. Okay, show me the precedent.
Experience.
You said you had a precedent, parallel, and verified. What's the precedent?
Me.
You're the precedent.
I create information all the time.
Okay, you're the precedent for the chemical reactions in DNA, which we discussed previously.
No.
If you have a chemical construct wherein you get a certain codon, a certain arrangement of those 4 nucleotides, and they produce a specific protein, then it's not even qualified as information in the type that you describe it.
It
right?
is.
It has really is not, and it just produces a protein.
It has specificity.
You change the codon, it produces a different protein, right? So it's not in any sense at all like the type of information that you would equate to your God. So you are not and cannot be the precedent for DNA being designed by a mind. You are not evidence of that. You are not the precedent. Now, show me a precedent for how a mind can construct DNA.
I'm showing you, I'm giving you a precedent how a mind can create information, how a mind can produce information.
We know that minds can produce information.
And we know that that's the only
chemical constructs. And we're also doing this without hands.
Yeah, but
we're not talking about a laboratory. You're talking about that a mind can literally wish things into being.
I'm saying that a mind is the only known thing that's capable of producing information. That's what I'm saying. Except
that we know that chemicals can produce chemical outcomes through stoichiometry, and that's essentially what we're talking about with that's essentially what we're talking about with DNA. So, okay, I'm just going to ask that we've covered this. You didn't get it. I get that you didn't get it. We're not going to go over this again. So, because we've done what was an hour and a half on this, and we did in fact cover this to death. So, do you have anything apart from your misunderstanding of genetics? Do you have anything else?
I have a lot.
Okay, what else?
Well, there's the cosmological argument. There's the fine-tuning argument. There's
both fallacies. Would you like me to address either one of them at a time, or you want me to address both of them at the same time?
I don't know. I don't even want to get into those because we have.
Do you have anything other than frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies? Do you have anything that actually qualifies as evidence? Because the cosmological argument is a fallacy.
Well,
and so the fine tuning. Well, the fine tuning is not necessarily a fallacy. It's just a misunderstanding. Clearly, the universe was not fine tuned for us. We can only exist on what, an eighth of the. I'm sorry, not an eighth. What was the actual figure? We can only exist on a minority proportion of the surface of this one rock, and we will be killed instantly anywhere else in the cosmos that we're aware of so far, including over 100 exoplanets that we've discovered. We will be killed instantly on any of them,
and that's
maybe one. There may be one that we wouldn't be. Might be one that we wouldn't be killed instantly, where we might survive for a few minutes.
And that falsifies the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, if the fine tuning is so not fine that we are killed everywhere except for this one tiny little fish. But you ever go to the pet store and find the beta fish in the little cups? They just have little plastic cups.
Yeah.
We're in one of those cups.
Yeah. Okay.
And the next nearest cup to us, let's say mine is in Dallas, and the next nearest cup to us is in Bangkok.
And if the universe wasn't finely tuned, there wouldn't even be that.
And it's not even in Bangkok. It's on fucking Mars. The next Dixie cup with a beta fish in it is on Mars. That's how far
I understand. And what I'm saying is, if the universe wasn't as finely tuned as it is, there would be no life at all.
It's not finely tuned at all. It's not. And if we can only exist on a fraction, a minority fraction of the surface of this one rock and nowhere else, and everything else is so far away that we can't even ever get to someplace else where we might subsist.
Okay. You're saying the cosmological constant is not fine-tuned?
Absolutely not. Yes, it's not. And this is not according to me. This is according to actual physicists who have published on this subject.
All right. Well, listen, I'm not an astrophysicist, so I can't say you're wrong.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you.
But there are
aspects of this argument was, why do you want to believe? Why does this appeal to you?
Christianity. Why does Christianity?
Well, belief in a God, belief specifically in that God, because that's one of the more perverse gods I can think of. I can think of a lot better gods than that one. But if we're going to argue, why do you believe in a God at all? And then we'll specify why you believe in that particular one.
I tried to tell you why I believe in a God, and you kept saying we covered all that. We covered how.
But your misunderstanding of genetics is not evidence.
No, it's not my understanding of genetics. It's my understanding of information. Where information.
So your misunderstanding of information then is not evidence.
Well,
but neither am I asking for evidence. I'm asking for, why do you want to believe? Why does this appeal to you? Because let me clarify. Maybe you're not getting the reason I'm asking the question. In my perspective, the only value any information can have is however true you can show it to be. If you can't show that it's true at all, then it has no value at all. So every day that you've spent in a pew listening to a preacher has been meaningless. If they can't show you that what they're saying is true, then it is, in effect, a lie.
Okay.
If you're just stating things are true because you want them to be true, but they're not actually evidently true, then you're not being honest.
All right.
So there's no value in that information.
Okay.
What appeal do you have in believing this? Why does this appeal to you?
The reason it appeals to me, well, for one reason, every other religion is man trying to, reach out to God, man trying to become good enough to meet up to God's standards. Christianity is God reaching down to man because he couldn't.
No. In other words, what you're saying is that every religion, period, including Christianity, is man trying to reach up to God.
No, Christianity is the opposite. Christianity is God.
How does Christianity
coming down to man? Christianity is God coming down to man and redeeming.
Just like Bhakti Hinduism, exactly like Bhakti Hinduism. No differences at all. So this is God in the flesh. Literally in the flesh, not like Christianity, where Jesus was not actually God in the flesh. We're talking about Krishna.
Of course, God.
Krishna was actually God in the flesh, and even described himself as such.
And so is Jesus.
Except that he wasn't.
Jesus called himself God.
Jesus still had to pray to God.
To the Father.
Right.
Remember,
He had to pray to the Father,
triune
but
God.
Krishna didn't. Krishna didn't because Krishna was the ultimate personality of the Godhead.
And so
Krishna was God literally in the flesh, where Jesus
Warren,
was not.
Warren, you said you were a Christian. But what church did you go to?
It didn't matter what church I went to.
It did, because if they didn't explain to you the Trinity.
Oh yeah, I understand the Trinity. I was not raised in a binitarian. I was not raised in a Trinitarian church. Yeah. I was raised in a binitarian church, but I do understand the Trinity and how it was adopted from the Trimurti, which is the Hindu belief.
Let's not even worry about how theories of how it was derived. If you understand the Trinity, you understand that Jesus.
I understand the Trimurti, because that one makes sense. The Trinity does not. The Trinity has contradictions in it.
That's fine, but if as long as we understand the Trinity, we understand why Jesus prayed to the Father, and that made him God.
No, we don't. Father was. Because Jesus was represented. Jesus is represented as being the same person as God.
No, he's not. No, he's not. No.
Yes, a whole lot of evangelicals watching this right now are saying yes, he is.
No, he's. Well, I don't know where there's evangelicals are getting their theology from. God is three persons: Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and Jesus is the same person as God. Jesus is God.
Jesus as God prayed to the Father as God.
But they can't be separate personalities.
They are. That's right. They are distinct personalities. They are not separate.
In the Trimurti, they are distinct personalities, but in the Trinity, they are not.
No,
they're all the same essence.
No, I'm sorry. They are distinct personalities in the Trinity.
Okay. So if Jesus were God in the flesh, then Jesus would know everything that God knows, right?
Not necessarily.
How could Jesus be God in the flesh? So you're saying Jesus is not God?
No, I'm saying Jesus is God, but in his humanity, he didn't necessarily have all knowledge. He had
is Jesus an avatar of God?
No, Jesus is God.
Jesus is God. I just said, okay, if Jesus is God, then Jesus knows everything God knows.
He was also man.
Right. Which doesn't change that.
He was subject
when you're playing a video game.
He was subject to all the limitations of man's.
Okay, so if you're playing World of Warcraft, and you create a character, or I know that there's a number of other similar games to Sims, or what is it? I can't remember the other names of the other games that are like this. But if you create a character in one of these, multiplayer universal games like World of Warcraft, that character obviously knows everything that you know. Now, the character is limited to that universe, but it still knows everything you know, right? So that character is, in a sense, you. You are more than that character is.
Okay,
well, that character is just an avatar of you.
You're making an analogy, and of course, all analogies are going to break down at some point, and that's obviously the point where this analogy breaks down.
Okay, show me where it breaks down.
Well, I was about to say, it specifically says, and I know you don't believe in Scripture, but if you're going to examine the Christian faith, you need to examine the documents upon which the Christian faith is based. And according to the Christian faith, Jesus had to identify with the people who he came to save in every aspect. Okay, do we know everything? No. Well, then Jesus couldn't know everything. Do we get hungry? Jesus got hungry.
So Jesus is not an avatar of God. You cannot say that Jesus is God.
What's an avatar?
Exactly what I just described to you. What Krishna was and what Jesus was not.
Okay, but you're saying an avatar. I'll either agree or disagree.
Okay, let me give you two explanations here. You're a god, or you're a guy. You want to get into a video game. You're a god and you want to create a physical being for a physical world, or you're a guy and you want to create a character for a virtual reality video game. So you create your World of Warcraft character, and God creates his avatar. And that avatar then goes into that world. They're limited by that world. You are not limited. You're not limited to World of Warcraft. You can get up and go to Walmart if you want to, but you don't have to stay in Warcraft like your character does.
The guy who created Warcraft, is that a one person, one being, or three persons, one being?
Is it in any sense relevant to what we're talking about right now, or is it just a complete distraction into left field?
No, it is relevant because
it's not remotely relevant. It just shows that you don't understand what I'm trying to explain to you. So if you have a God, you have a God who creates the Word made flesh, right? John 3:16, right? So Jesus comes down and he's a representative God. He's God's player character in that game.
Well, you understand he pre-existed, though, right? He pre-existed.
What?
He pre-existed.
Did you pre-exist the game?
Well, Jesus pre-existed.
Did you pre-exist World of Warcraft? What year did World of Warcraft come out? What year were you born? Did you pre-exist World of Warcraft?
I don't know. Did I?
You definitely are older than World of Warcraft.
Okay,
that's granted. You are older. You're my age. Okay, we pre-exist Pong. Okay, so we definitely pre-exist World of Warcraft. So you create a character, which is you, made into the reality of that game. Now, you're not limited to the reality of that game, but your avatar is. So Jesus, being God made flesh, is limited to the physical world that you, as God, are not limited to.
Nope.
Gotcha? Right. Does that make sense? Okay. So your character that you play in that game is essentially you. I mean, it's a representation of you. It has a different identity.
Not the same person.
Right. It's not the same person because you can create... You can create little character affectations that don't actually apply to you. You know, you can have gigantic muscles. It can be a different gender. It can be a different species. I played a video character game that was a dinosaur of my own construct. So, I mean, yeah. So your character can be different from
video games.
But you're what?
Where do you get the time to play video games?
I don't.
Okay. All right.
I absolutely do not.
I wouldn't think you did. I know I don't have the time.
I have friends who are active in this movement who somehow find time to play video games. I don't.
No.
I am encroaching on so many different things. Just taking the time to talk to you. You have no idea. I have 3 different homework projects and 4 YouTube-based projects and a public event upcoming in an hour that I have to leave to. That is a major deal. But no, I absolutely do not have time.
Okay.
My determination is that I will be the hardest working atheist activist there is, and that's the way I'm going to die. Okay, I do not have time to play video games. If my wife wants to watch a movie with me, it's an encroachment on my time. That's a huge issue for me. So I mean, I don't, but I understand the analogy.
Yeah. Okay. So you were all right. So let's get back to your.
You create a video game, and let's say you're God, and instead of creating a World of Warcraft character or a what is that other? Everybody's gonna. There's another video game. Something about I used to be a warrior like you, but I took an arrow to the knee. Everybody knows the game that I'm talking about. I only known it because my daughter played it for 10 minutes in my presence. That's it. I can't even remember but it's one of those games that a lot of different people will join into and play. Okay, yeah. So you create a world where everybody has a character. In that world, I guess you can have multiple gods all playing multiple representative characters. But anyway, God creates a player character for this world, and that's God made flesh. That's Jesus. Now Jesus knows everything God knows because Jesus is God's avatar.
No, you just said he's limited to that world.
Right, he's limited to that world, but he still knows everything you know, doesn't he?
No, not if he's limited to that world.
Let's try this again. You create a video game character. You create a virtual reality video game character for whatever the name of that game is, right? How can that character not know? You're playing him. So how can that character not know everything you know? Of course he knows everything you know. You're playing him.
All right. This is actually this is a question that comes up. I think really? Now I know where you're going. Here's my explanation of this. You're a soldier. Okay, and you're armed. Just imagine you're a soldier, and you've got your knife. You've got your whatever weaponry soldiers have. Their grenades and everything. Now you've got this. This is yours. Okay, because in light of the fact that you are a soldier.
Frankish bearded axe and my winged spear. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. But you walk into a store and it says no no guns beyond this point or something like that. So you take all that stuff, you lay it aside. Okay, now you have access to it anytime you want. It's yours. It's not somebody else's that you're borrowing. It's your equipment. You've got access to it, but you've laid it aside temporarily. You know,
not relevant to what we were talking about.
It is relevant because it says like I said, it says in Hebrews that Jesus had to identify with the people who he came to redeem in every respect. So if we
made Jesus
had to be hungry, if Jesus was tired, if we become tired, Jesus had to become tired.
So God made Jesus stupid.
God made Jesus. No, Jesus was probably had the highest IQ of probably
except that he didn't know what the smallest seeds were, and even though other farmers of his day and in his location did, so he showed himself to be a fool there, and he didn't know when the fruiting season where fig trees were, and he didn't know what the causes of any of the maladies he pretended to heal were. So God made Jesus stupid.
No, Jesus knew all that stuff.
But he didn't, as he made clear. He cursed a fig tree for not bearing fruit out of season.
He cursed the fig tree.
And he said it doesn't matter.
The fig tree was represented Israel, and he cursed.
He said it doesn't matter what a man takes into his body, that it will not defile him. And what matters what comes out of his mouth that will defile him. He said that if you just believe, i.e., pretend hard enough that you could tell the mountain to jump into the sea and it'll jump into the sea. All you got to do is believe hard enough, which means pretend. So yes, we're talking about a faith healer, dumb as a box of rocks. So the guy knew nothing. And that's if we assume that he was an actual historical guy. We're talking about an actual historical guy who was dumb as a bag of hammers.
So he knew. So he was as dumb as a bag of hammers, but somehow he knew that
nothing. He didn't even know that the world was round. He hoped that it would, that when God comes back, that it would be when he comes back at the right hand of God instead of being with God, because God and Jesus are separate people. He hoped that when they come back, that it wouldn't be in wintertime. Excuse me? He's not aware that when he shows up in wintertime, that when it's wintertime in this horizon, excuse me. Excuse me. He's not aware that when he shows up in wintertime on one hemisphere, that it's summer in the other. He didn't know that the earth was round. What's the whole story about him going up with Daniel and the tree or the mountain where he meets Satan?
He didn't say that. He didn't say that.
Okay, I didn't read all of that. It's not actually in there that everybody can find, and nobody can Google it right now. Where there's a tree in the Bible that says that you can see in Daniel, where you can see all of the kingdoms of the world at the one time, which is not possible unless the earth is flat. And I realize it's a dream, but still, that's a dream that takes the assumption that the world is flat, because you can't see all kingdoms from the top of a tree otherwise. And the thing where Satan takes Jesus up on the top of a tall mountain where you can see, that's again requires a flat world. So Jesus didn't even know that the world was a sphere,
or it required some kind of vision that they both had. No, I mean,
anybody hearing a slightly feminine name calling a slightly feminine voice calling my name in the background, that's my parrot. I'm sorry, I have a menagerie here, and my parrot will call my name in the middle of a damn podcast. I can't go get him, one, because I would have to get off camera, and two, he just likes to call my name. And if I try to go pick him up, he will hang upside down from the bars, which is body language for touch me and I will bite your fingers off. He has to be in the mood to be picked up. So I apologize for that. Please continue.
Oh, I was just saying, unless you Satan could have brought Jesus up on the pinnacle and showed him the kingdoms of the earth in a vision. What's that?
Not all of them at once, like the story says.
In a vision, sure he could. Why not?
No, he couldn't even in a vision. Why would you need to be on the top of a tall mountain? If it's in a vision, it could be in a basement. It wouldn't matter.
It wouldn't matter. That's right. But
right. So he didn't have to take him on a tall mountain unless he believed, or the storyteller the storyteller, the mere fallible human fable maker, who the myth makers of men who made up the story thought that the world was flat.
Okay, well, even if they thought the world was flat, there's no way that you could see the entire Earth from any mountain.
That's correct. In the reality of it, but then the reality doesn't allow a firmament either, and the Bible still talks about that, doesn't it?
Wait. Oh, I'm saying
everything the Bible says about the Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos, absolutely everything the Bible says about the Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos is wrong. All of it. The stars cannot fall to the Earth. There is no, there are no columns to support the Earth. There is no firmament above the Earth. There are no windows in the firmament where the firmament isn't. None of that is right.
You're talking about apocalyptic language.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. When you talk about stars falling and all that stuff, that's
I'm not talking about apocalypses. No, I'm talking about the expanse of the firmament that's described in Genesis.
Language.
Genesis is not apocalyptic.
And what did Genesis say?
Genesis describes a crystal dome, a solid molten glass crystal dome with windows in it that lets the water in from outside, because you have waters above the firmament.
You'll have to read
the sun and the moon are both said to be the same size, even though we know that's not true.
And read that for me. I never read that.
And then the stars are all supposed to be smaller than the sun, which of course we know, and the moon.
You have to give me these references, because I've never read any of this.
I include that in my fourth. It's in the video for the fourth foundational falsehoods of creationism. I go through a whole list.
The fourth foundational falsehoods of creationism.
The fourth foundational falsehood of creationism, yes. Which mostly deals with philosophy, but also covers one of it. Toward the end, it covers some of the things that the Bible says about the nature of the Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos, and it is all wrong. It's embarrassingly wrong. They hold the same. The Bible authors held the same erroneous beliefs that other people did throughout the Orient, the Babylonians through the Chinese and the Indians. They all had these ideas about a flat planet covered by a giant crystal dome, and the sun and the moon and the stars are all inside that dome.
All right. I don't know what passages you're talking about. So
several of them, but as I said, if you want to look up the fourth foundational falsehood of creationism, it explains and gives reference to each biblical verse therein.
Okay. Or does it give your take on it?
You're going to call it my take regardless, I guess. It doesn't matter. But I do give the references where the Bible describes a solid crystalline dome with windows in it, that it looks like molten glass, that it's crystal, and that there's water above where the firmament isn't, and that the sun and the moon and the stars are all contained within the expanse of it. Yeah, it's not my take. It's what the Bible actually says. Mm-hmm. And you can find that parallel in Zoroastrianism, throughout the Persian religions, throughout the Oriental religions, and I'm not sure, but I know that the Indian religions also have something similar. So they have a kind of a Discworld concept along those same lines. So this was common throughout Asia. It's wrong, but every religion believed that, and that's why it's in the Bible too. The Bible does not describe anything about Earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos accurately. Doesn't describe anything accurately. But the way that the Bible gets everything wrong,
hangs the earth upon nothing.
The way that the Bible describes everything wrong is the way that line in the Bible gets the way that line in the Bible gets it wrong is the same way that every other religion got it wrong back then.
Well, but it's not wrong. It's right. The earth is hanging upon nothing.
Yeah, it's an eternal abyss, an abyss of water. So space is full of water, and God hung this reverse snow globe where there's an air bubble surrounded by, it's a flat table, stands on columns, covered by a giant crystal dome. The crystal dome has windows in it to let the water in. Then it has fountains to let the water in from above or below it as well. Yeah, all of that is in the Bible. That's in the fourth foundational falsehood of creationism. There are 15 foundational falsehoods of creationism. There actually should have been 17 different falsehoods to cover another one to cover kinds, which I kind of covered in the 10th version, but it really needed to have a separate video for cover kind. And there's a number of erroneous other. Well, I've covered all of them in my book. My book, by the way, has sold roughly 12,000 copies so far, talking about the foundational falsehoods of creationism. If you want to look up the foundational falsist creationism, you can get that. But that still doesn't get to our point about why do you believe, or why do you want to believe in any of this absolute horseshit?
I want to make sure I answer your question.
I know that there are people here that are complaining that I talked more than you did. They're probably right. I'm trying to control that. I will just.
Well, I've tried to interject myself, but you keep cutting me off. So I was all right. Well, I'll go. I'll wait.
You're right. You're right. It is entirely my bad. I meant to shut my face up and just let you talk, but everything you say is wrong. I can't.
Everything you say is wrong too. It's just that I can't tell you because you. All right.
All right. Go ahead. I'll do my best. The people commenting. You're right. I talk too much. I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
Not a problem. We disagree on the issue of information and the origin of information. I do believe that the only source that's capable of producing information is intelligence. I know of no other time.
Doesn't apply to DNA.
I'm sorry.
Which clearly does not apply to DNA.
No, it would have. Well, see,
it can't. Doesn't even. There's not even a possibility that it can apply to DNA.
Tell me one more time why you can't.
In order to establish whether something is possible, you have to show a precedent, which you are not the precedent for how a mind can generate information into chemical construct like the DNA molecule. You are not the precedent for that. You have to have a parallel wherein something else shows in nature where a mind, absent hands, a mind can create information, right? You can't show that parallel either. And you don't have a verified phenomenon indicating that, whether we can explain it or not, we know that this is in fact the case. So this has to be, whether we understand it, we know that this thing has happened. You don't have any of those three.
Okay. I think I do.
I know you think you do. That's the embarrassing thing.
There's actually quite a bit of evidence that the soul does exist.
Can you please show me any evidence at all? Because I guarantee you, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the soul exists. That's probably the first biggest problem with God is that there is no soul.
Are you familiar with a neurosurgeon? What was his name? Adrian Owen?
No.
Okay. Look him up.
Okay.
What he did was he did an experiment with numerous patients who were in a.
Can you give me a link that I can include below so that I don't have to look him up?
Yeah. Right.
Coincidental to that, I will also include a link from astrophysicist Sean Carroll, who gives a presentation showing why the soul is not even possible.
Okay, I'll listen to him. And where do you want me to put the link?
So obviously there can't be evidence of a soul.
Well, if Carroll's right, then there can't be, but I don't believe.
But if your scientist is right, then you would be able to tell me what that evidence is.
I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
Hey, you keep cutting me off. Adrian Owen, he conducted a number of experiments back in like 2000, around 2006. He had one patient who was in a persistent vegetative state, and they put her in an MRI, a functional. I can't remember what type of MRI it was, but it was an MRI. They put her in there, and then he said something, through the headphones, and her brain lit up. Okay. So then what he did was he said, well, that's strange. And then he took like 15 other normal people, and he also hooked them up to the MRI. He ran them through the MRI, and he would say something, and again, their brain lit up just like hers did. Now Owen took the scan from the patient, took the scan from the 15 other normal people, and gave it to, I guess, his associate. He said, tell me if you can tell the difference between these scans. He couldn't tell the difference between her scan, I believe it was a girl, and the 15 normal people. Okay, every time he spoke, every time he said something, she gave the same response as these 15 normal people that were not in vegetative states at all. So then what he did was he said, you know what, that could just be because, a physical reaction to the sound coming into the ear, and the brain is just responding to that. He said, let me try this. And he mixed up the words so that they didn't make any sense. And then he communicated that to her. Her brain didn't light up. And then they did the same thing to the 15 other normal patients, and their brains didn't light up. And now, I don't know how you're going to interpret the results of that, but there was the same response from a person in a vegetative state as there was with normal people when they heard, when something was said to them.
Okay, so if you're done, then my first impression of that, assuming that anything you just said is correct, because
it's absolutely correct.
I know you're going to say it's absolutely correct, because
where do you want me? What link? Where do you want me to put the link? I'll give you the link.
Yeah, send me the link and email. I will.
Okay.
You'll, and people will be able to see it below. But every time I've talked to a creationist and they start citing scientific data, when I read the papers they cite, and it's not just me, there's a whole bunch of other people. Potholer 54 is certainly good at this. I mean, every time people give him citations for the support creationism, he reads the paper and realizes that it doesn't say what they said it did.
Okay,
I do the same thing. You know, when Pastor Bob Enyart cited like a half a dozen different papers to me, I read them, and none of them said remotely what he said they did. But if we assume
Bob Enyart.
Yeah, I had
okay. I'm gonna tell you, don't listen to him, just like you told me not to.
Really?
Listen. Yeah.
I needed you to tell me what an asshole Bob Enyart. But okay, so anyway, but the thing is, even if we assume that what you said is absolutely correct, which the historic tendency has been that you're reading this wrong, but assuming that you read it right. The first inclination I would have is that it was just the same thing as when somebody goes into I'm sure you've heard these stories about somebody that goes in for surgery and they're still conscious.
No,
everybody thinks
in vegetative state.
Yeah, everybody thinks that they're completely out, but they're not. They can't move. They're absolutely paralyzed. There's nothing they can do to indicate any kind of consciousness at all, but they feel every bit of pain throughout the surgical procedure. None of that.
Yeah,
so I would suspect, my first initial thing would be to suspect that there's nothing, not one single thing about what you just said that in any sense implies even the possibility of a soul, period. As a matter of fact, we already know from other reasons.
A person in a vegetative state that has no cognitive
has no perceptible cognitive ability, but might actually still have cognitive ability, just like the people who were put into sedation, and we think that they're completely out and they're not. Right. So there's no indication that the soul is even possible. There's no possibility of a soul, and yet you're drawing that conclusion. How? I don't know.
Okay. Well, I don't know where you're getting that a soul is impossible. I guess you're getting that from Sean Carroll.
Because there's no possibility. There's no precedent, no parallel, no verified phenomenon. There is no indication that such a thing can be, and we have substantial evidence against such a thing. Not only has every claim of indication of a soul been shown to be fallacious, every single one of them.
Well, the one I just gave you has not been. Yeah, you gave me your possible explanation.
No, I didn't give you a possible explanation. Yeah, I did. I did give you a possible explanation for that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have too many dogs in this house.
I told you that's why you need to get cat. Well, you do have cats. I'm sorry.
We have two cats.
Yeah.
I have too many dogs, and now I have a really, really big one. That that if the mailman drops something in the box, that thing will go off. Anyway, go ahead.
How about this? Another guy. Wilder Penfield. Now he did some studies earlier, I believe in the 60s, where he would operate on people, and they would be conscious. Now this time they would be conscious because he's operating on their brains. And of course, the brain doesn't feel pain; it has no pain receptors. So you're able to actually have the person awake as you're. He would stimulate different parts of the brain, and he can get the arm to move, and he can get this to move, and that something else. He could stimulate memories and things like that.
I apologize.
No, not a problem. There he is.
There's one of them. Yeah, I have 3, and somebody just brought a delivery. So
what is that? What is that?
This one is a Catahoula.
Okay.
A Louisiana leopard dog.
All right, because it kind of looks like a German Shorthair.
It does have some similarities, but if you get out of the black area, then there's some mottled, almost blue spots.
Huh.
So I thought originally it was a blue tick healer because it has some blue in it.
I never saw that.
Continue, please.
Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So he would stimulate different parts of the brain, and he could move the person's arm, and elicit memories and things like that. But the thing is, every time he would move the patient's arm, he would the patient knew that it was Penfield who was causing that. They said, "Yeah, you did that." They knew they didn't do that. They didn't do it voluntarily. They knew it was Penfield that was stimulating their brain and causing them to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
do you have any evidence of a soul?
So if the because if the intentionality came from the brain, there would have been no way for them to know who was moving their arm. As far as they would know, they moved their own arm because stimulation came from the brain.
Right.
Which is where.
Do you have any evidence of a soul?
What's that?
So do you have any evidence of a soul?
Intentionality.
So somebody else can tap into our physical wiring to conduct a physical response that the brain didn't cause, but it was caused externally, which does not in any sense indicate a soul in any concept whatsoever. So do you have evidence of a soul? And more importantly,
how did the person know that it wasn't them that were moving?
How you know what you do and what you don't do, right?
What's that?
So if your arm raises and flips off the next person and you didn't do that, then you know that you didn't do that. That's pretty easy. So there's no indication at all that a soul is even possible, much less evidence of a soul. Now, before I ask you again,
no.
I'm not going to ask you again if you have evidence of the soul. It's clear that you do not, because you do right now. But let me ask you this. Why would it be?
Maybe you didn't hear me. So can I say it one more time?
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, is that the parrot?
Yes.
I thought it was your wife.
No, it's the parrot.
And then I said, maybe it's the parrot. The neurosurgeon stimulates the brain, and the person says, "You just made my arm move." Now, how did the person know that the neurosurgeon made the arm move? Why didn't they think they did it?
The reason I just explained, that you know what you do. Right, so somebody else.
Right, exactly. And if intentionality came from the brain, they should have thought, "Oh, yeah, I just moved my arm."
Right. So again, that's common. That's expected, and no indication at all that a soul is even possible. So do you have any evidence of a soul?
I have absolutely no evidence of a soul.
Okay, I thought not. And the obvious thing was, and the reason you should have realized that before this conversation began, is because if anybody ever had in the 1950s or at any other time, if they had shown evidence of a soul, then souls would not be a matter of faith today. Somebody knocked at my door.
Part of the charm. That's
okay.
That's part of their charm, right?
Yes, I love them, but it's impossible to be professional anymore.
Well, that's
So what I want to say is, if anybody had evidence of a soul, then souls would not be a matter of faith today. We would be able to show the experiment. We would be able to have peer review confirm decades ago by your description. We would have in colloquial terms effectively proved the soul, just like we effectively proved evolution decades ago.
Penfield started his career as a materialist, and he
Okay.
ended his career as a passionate dualist.
Okay.
On
And
his-
why are there still materialists then? If there is evidence of a soul, why do materialists still exist?
Why are there flat earthers?
Flat earthers are denying reality. Can you present a reality that I'm denying?
I just presented you with two.
You presented me with something that, even if I were to take it at false value, at face value, I'm sorry, that was a Freudian slip. Even if I were to take it at face value, would not imply a soul in any sense whatsoever.
I haven't, but you gave an explanation for the first one, which, let's consider that. But the second one, you didn't give any explanation at all.
I don't know what first and second one you're talking about.
The one about the person in a persistent vegetative state, you said, well, maybe they were actually
again, taking both at face value. Neither one, in any sense, implies that a soul is even possible. Much less that it is probable.
It would, because the person who moved their arm should know.
Right. And what was the word that you just?
They should know.
Intentionality was the word that you used?
Yes.
Right. Intentionality does not, in any sense, imply a soul is even possible. So, we're talking about something completely different and unrelated to intentionality. If you're talking about how the physical body physically responds, we know that we can take a dead animal and we can make nervous responses out of it. We can send electrodes through it and we can still cause function. In dead things, we can still cause function. So we know that the soul is not indicated there in any sense at all. But the more important thing.
So how did the person know that it was the surgeon? No, don't do that.
This is the fourth time I've answered the same question, because you know what you do.
That's right. You know what you do.
Right. Which does not, in any sense, imply that a soul is even possible, much less indicated.
If the stimulation came from the brain, how did they know that it wasn't them that moved the arm?
Because the stimulation obviously didn't come from the brain. You didn't intend to move your arm. That was externally done on the mechanics of your physical being. Has nothing whatsoever to do with a soul. A soul is not possible. And let me try to explain a little bit more about why a soul is not possible.
Okay.
We know that the damages done to your brain by chemicals, by alcohol, by drugs, by damage, by a number of different things, can even change your personality in predictive ways.
It could change your personality, yeah.
Right. So that already implies that we're talking about entirely physical beings. There's not a soul here. Now, what can you show me to imply that something that is not dependent on physicality, something that is somehow immune to physicality, that doesn't change personalities because of brain damage or drugs or whatever, could possibly survive in any sense and be independent of the matrix from which it is encompassed? We know that everything, absolutely everything about your personality is influenced by your physical being and is produced by your physical being and cannot be independent of your physical being. So where is there evidence of a soul?
Okay, there's another neurosurgeon, and I don't recall his name right now, but he experimented extensively on patients, and he said, but there's one thing I could alter their personality. I can do all kinds of things by interacting with their physical brain. But
right, if they had a soul, then none of that should be possible. Go ahead.
Shortcut. He said, there's one thing I could not touch: the person's sense of who they are. That's the one thing he could not.
And even that, I can already think of instances on the top of my head where brain damage changes a core concept of who you are. where it changes
Well,
your aesthetics,
Well,
and
he
your
couldn't do it.
tastes and your personality.
Your
We know that
personality,
events
I'll
like
give you
that
that.
can happen.
I'll give you that. You can change a lot of things, but you can't change the sense of who a person is.
So
Let me ask you this: why is it that we never have any intellectual seizures?
What?
Intellectual seizures. A seizure.
Seizure.
A seizure. Seizure.
What is an intellectual seizure?
What is an intellectual seizure?
Right.
Well, a physical seizure would be, you're laying on the ground and going into convulsions.
Right.
An intellectual seizure would be all of a sudden you start thinking of justice and mercy and ethics, or you start doing calculus and you just can't stop.
Why do we never have things that don't make sense?
Well, why don't we have that?
Right. Why don't we have things that don't make sense?
Why don't we have things?
Why don't we have things that don't? There's no reason we would ever have them in the first place. Why? That you're asking me.
All that stuff comes from the brain, and the seizures.
Right, and you're talking about the higher brain functions that have to be in accordance with the best health of the brain. So the best the brain can perform. Why doesn't the brain perform at its absolute best when it's not performing at its best? Is what you're asking me.
No, I'm asking if the seizure is this. If the seizure.
Why don't we suddenly start doing calculus out of control?
Yeah, or contemplating justice and ethics and things like that.
Out of control.
Out of control. Yeah.
Why don't we have higher functions when our brains aren't functioning highly? Why don't we have top performance when we're underperforming? Is what you're asking me.
No, when we're having a seizure, when we're having a physical seizure, our brains are underperforming.
Okay.
But why can't our higher functions ever go out of control like that?
So why can't a 1954 Volkswagen Beetle go 210 miles an hour unmodified? Is what you're asking me.
No. I'm saying if all these things originate in the brain.
If a soul existed, why would the soul's existence, or how would the soul's existence imply that our physical brains would suddenly physically perform at their physical best because of a non-physical soul?
Because that part of the brain starts just
that part
uncontrollably.
What part of the brain are you talking about? You said that part of the brain.
I'm not a neurologist. I couldn't say what part of the brain.
So it's not a part that has anything to do. It's a physical part of the brain, right? That you're talking about, whatever part it is, that has nothing to do with a non-physical soul.
If materialism is correct, it would be. What
do you mean if materialism is correct? What does materialism mean to you?
That the material is all there is.
How about that the material is? Would you accept that the material is?
Material is.
Do you accept that the material is?
Yes.
Okay, so you're trying to promote.
I'm pretty sure.
So you accept that the material exists, right? That we have physicality to us, right? You accept that the physical world exists.
It could.
It could.
If
I punch you in the face, are you going to have a response because the physical world exists, or do you have to imagine it to exist before it happens? Are we living in a matrix, or does physicality actually exist?
I was going to say there's evidence for that, but
there's evidence for what?
That we're living in a matrix.
There's evidence.
Yeah,
we're living in a matrix.
Yeah,
brilliant. Since the very concept of the matrix precludes evidence, I would love to hear what your evidence is.
Oh, I'm not prepared to go into all that. But
okay, so there is not evidence.
None that I can give you right now.
Well, if there was evidence, you could give it to me right now. Could you give it to me Thursday? No, today is Thursday. Could you give it to me next Thursday?
No, today's Friday.
Okay, you're right. Today is Friday. So can you give it to me Thursday?
If you'd like.
You can give me evidence that we're in a matrix on Thursday, but you can't give it to me today. That's interesting. Why is that?
Can you give me evidence for everything you know at the drop of a hat?
Yes.
Well, that's because you're a lot smarter than I am.
No, it isn't.
Yes.
No, it isn't. I've been studying this one subject to the exclusion of a lot of other things I probably should have been.
Exactly.
For quite a while. Yes.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with being smarter than you.
I study many things, and that's why I just don't have this stuff on the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't have to wait until Thursday. If there's actual evidence, I can find the links by tonight. I can find the links to share them to you.
All right. Well, I'm not allowed. Okay, it's a bad word, and I'm not allowed to say it.
What's a bad word?
It begins with a Q.
You're not allowed to say the Q word?
Q word. Yes. Yes.
Okay. I don't know that I can do this anymore.
Well,
I know I'm going to have critics in here that say that this is a maddening experience. And if you think it was maddening listening to it, imagine being in it. For me, it was maddening. Every time I talk to believers, honestly, and I don't mean this to sound as an insult, whenever it's especially bad when I talk to a multiplicity of them. On the rare occasions that I've gone to a church to talk to a group of people who are all believers, I sincerely believe that I have descended into a madhouse, because nothing. 99.9% of the time, it will have been the case that you did ascend into. Can you show a link to verify that your statistic is just that your statistic was correct?
Which one? The brain thing.
Because it just reminds me of the postman on the TV show Cheers, who would make up his own statistics on the fly and never had documentation to show that what he just said was correct.
Yeah.
So you just said 99.1%. Can you show me a link that what you just said is correct? That's
the 99.9% of the churches that you went into, you probably did go into a madhouse.
I would say that it's probably 100% of the churches that I've been into have been in some sense a madhouse, because
I would agree with at least 99.9%. That's what
okay. I can't find anything that isn't mad about any of them.
Right.
All of them are asserting things that they can't show to be true, and yet they're believing in it anyway. There's a huge philosophical difference.
Well, I believe that you believe that the information in DNA was created spontaneously through directed process.
I clarified in our last.
And I
clarified in our last conversation that I don't believe it was created spontaneously, and I explained exactly what that means.
Well, yeah. Well, you gave me a definition of spontaneity, and so in that regard, you believe it was created spontaneously.
In no regard do I consider that the information was created spontaneously.
Sure, that's what I thought you said. I thought you gave me your definition of spontaneous.
Spontaneous generation. I was explaining to you how that was a supernatural belief that is grossly misrepresented by religious believers claiming to have scientific evidence of their God, and the only scientific evidence they can have is misrepresenting what the evidence really is. If I can get back one last time, if anybody ever had evidence of a soul or God, either one at a time in the 1950s, then why would I be completely unaware of that today? Why wouldn't everybody in the scientific community have accepted that the way that they did evolution?
Well, I just gave you a few reasons, and
you gave me no reason at all that even related to the question I just asked.
That's what you say.
So we can watch this is a video. They can go back and they can watch you not give an answer to that question over and over.
Well, they can watch me give the example of the person who raised their arm and they knew it was not
right. They can watch you give the irrelevant argument that does not imply your conclusion in any sense at all. They can see me try to explain to you 8 or 9 times why that didn't imply the conclusion that you erroneously jumped to. They can see you not understand all 8 explanations, but at no point will anybody ever have scientific evidence of a soul that was discovered in the 1950s, and yet nobody knows about it today. Nobody. except people who clearly do not understand what the fuck they're talking about.
Except for these not except for, but in particular, you do have these neurosurgeons who became dualists after starting out.
Became dualists.
What's that?
You said who became dualists?
Became dualists. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. There's an interesting notion. Again,
why?
If I can't believe I'm saying this again. This is going to be my last time, and we're going to have to close.
Okay. Yeah, you got something coming up at 6, don't you?
Well, no, it's worse now. The thing at 6 o'clock was canceled. It was moved to another evening. But I hope it was. I think it was. The thing at 6 o'clock was moved to another evening. But I've got another thing at 5:30, which is worse because I don't get to do that in the studio. I have to go downtown, which is a 30-minute drive, and we're almost approaching the moment when I have to disappear for that. But if somebody had discovered evidence of a soul in the 1950s, we would have evidence of a soul now. The worldwide scientific community would accept that, hey, we have evidence of a soul now. And they wouldn't be where you describe a physical process of a physical interruption of a neuroreceptor causing an arm spasm or what have you that is entirely physical and has no relevance to a soul. Your argument is not in any sense evidence that a soul is even possible. You do not have evidence of a soul. We do not have evidence of a soul. There is no evidence of a soul, period. Nor is there a possibility of a soul. So why do you believe what you want to? Why do you want to believe? What is the value in this belief for you?
Well, don't you? I mean, come on. You cherish the idea of, once you get to the end of your life, that's going to be it. You're just going to go off into oblivion.
Why would I cherish that?
Exactly. Why would you?
Right.
Well, that's one reason. I believe I like to believe what I believe.
The value in believing something that is evidently true is that it is only accurate information has practical application. There is no value in something that you can't show to be true. I told you that earlier on.
But you
so for me, the value is what you can show to be true. And if you can't show that it's true, that it has no value. But you find value in things you can't show to be true.
Well, obviously, I believe I have shown them to be true. Otherwise, hopefully I would relinquish those beliefs.
I'm at a loss to understand how you could even believe that what you told me is true.
Because I don't believe I heard any good answers to the.
I don't believe I heard any good questions.
Yeah, right.
When did you need something to be answered?
You don't believe you've heard good questions. I don't believe I've heard good answers.
I didn't have anything to answer. You never asked me a question. I asked you questions. You utterly failed to provide an answer. And then you completely reversed this. You now say that you have asked the questions. No, wait, you were supposed to give the answer, not ask the question. I asked the question. You failed to answer it.
What questions do you ask? I'm sorry.
Why do you want to believe what you do? What value do you find in what you believe? You utterly failed both of those questions.
I just answered you because when I die, I believe that I'm going to live forever in
the first time ever in this conversation have you brought that up. Thank you for finally, for the first time, period, in this whole conversation, beginning to answer that question. Now continue. Since you did not even attempt to answer that question until now.
All right, I apologize if I failed to answer that question. It certainly wasn't intentional. But I believe that when I die, I'm going to live forever in God's kingdom with God. No more pain, no more suffering, no more disease, sickness, eternal felicity.
How does that not terrify you?
How does that terrify me?
Yeah.
Eternal bliss?
Yeah, because that was terrifying to me as a 12-year-old.
Terrifying?
Yeah, because that was terrifying to me as a 12-year-old. Why is that not terrifying to you? And inescapable.
Did you ever do drugs?
And I try not to. I prefer not to. And inescapable.
Because I've done.
I have. That's why I don't do them now.
You didn't enjoy the feeling?
No, absolutely not. No, I did not.
Oh, well, I did. I did. Oh, man, I'll tell you what. If I wasn't a Christian, I'd be a drug addict. If I wasn't a Christian, I'd be an alcoholic because I was into all that stuff.
What does Christianity have to do with it?
Because I would say eternal bliss. If I know the feeling that drugs gave me, and I know the feeling that alcohol gave me, and if heaven is even better than that, then why should it terrify me?
Let's pretend.
Those are wonderful feelings.
Okay, let's pretend that my experience with drugs was wonderful. All right, let's pretend that. If that were the case, an inescapable, eternal anything would be terrifying.
Even this life?
This life for eternity?
Why not?
For billions of years after there's no planet left?
No, the planet goes on. Assuming the planet goes on.
You're assuming something that we know not to be true.
I'm assuming something we know the universe is going to die out one day.
Right. So you're going to continue to exist when the universe doesn't.
No, I'm saying.
And here's the important thing.
Saying you live in a world.
You can never, ever, ever end it. Ever.
What's that?
There's no way out.
Oh, yeah.
No way ever out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was I was saying we live in a world hypothetically where the universe does not burn out. The sun does not burn out. The universe just goes on forever.
We don't live in that hypothetical world. We live in the world where the universe will end and the sun will end and the earth will end.
But just imagine you didn't. Wouldn't you want to live in that world?
No. I don't want to live
I would.
There's an awful lot.
I enjoy my life.
I enjoy my life too. Would I enjoy my life for 50 trillion years?
I would. If I could have my cats.
I would
never have to say goodbye to anybody.
I think that you haven't looked at this even momentarily.
Well, all I can tell you is I have no desire to cease existing. I have none.
Okay. I, at least, fortunately, have that option. That if my existence is unbearable, I can get out of it. And if I were trapped for eternity,
but we're talking about bliss, eternal bliss. That's what.
Yeah.
Bliss.
Yeah.
Drug high.
Yeah. Which can't even work. Which
it can't work. But
do you believe in hell?
Yes.
Okay. So you have loved ones that are going to be in hell.
Yes.
Right? You have eternal bliss while your loved ones are in hell.
Absolutely.
So you have no human compassion.
I do have human compassion
right now, but if you have eternal bliss while your friends are burning eternally in hell, then you are not even you anymore. You have no human compassion.
The reason I have compassion, I believe the reason I have.
But you don't have compassion if you're living eternally in hell or in heaven with eternal bliss while your friends are in hell being punished eternally. Yeah. You cannot have human compassion in that condition. That's the most surface veneer of the problems of your belief system. That's just the very surface of it. That's before you get to any depth of it. Why have you not evaluated your belief system at all? Ever? You're as old as I am.
You're suggesting I never thought about this, that there's people in hell.
You are demonstrating that you've never thought about this.
Oh, trust me, I've thought about it.
Then why have you not come to any analysis?
Because, can I tell you what my analysis is? All right. The reason I don't like the idea about people being in hell, and I don't care who they are, whether it's family or friends or even people that I don't like. I would never want to see anybody in hell. That's because if you looked at where I am in relation to Hitler, okay, on a moral scale. Okay, if you looked at where I am in relation to Hitler, and you looked at where Christ is on the other end of that moral scale, all right, you wouldn't see the light of day between Hitler and me. Okay. That's because you understand what I'm saying?
No.
Morally speaking, I'm closer to Hitler than I am Christ.
Okay.
I'm infinitely closer to Hitler than I am Christ.
You're not infinitely. Everybody's on a bell curve, remember?
Except for God, if he exists.
Except for God doesn't exist, so he's not on the bell curve.
Exactly, right. God doesn't exist.
People are all in the bell curve.
Right, but if God, right.
I mean, Hitler was an artist who loved dogs and was a vegetarian. All right, so there's
all bad.
Right, so there's no all good, there's no all bad. We're not in either or category. We're all in the bell curve, right? Yeah. Which destroys the notion of heaven and hell.
But just for the sake of argument, can't you grant the existence of God for a second?
No, God is a logical impossibility. God is an absurdity.
Okay, all right, yeah, but you have to accept it in order for me to explain something to you. Now you don't have to accept.
Oh, I can take hypotheticals. We can talk about the X-Men, the Marvel universe, if you want to. I can entertain ideas without accepting them.
All right. I said except for the sake of argument, but you say a hypothetical. We'll call it a hypothetical.
Whatever.
Hypothetically,
okay.
You look at where I am in relation to Hitler, okay, and you can't see the light of day. Even though he's so bad, he did so many terrible things.
Okay.
You can't see the light, but
he was a creationist. You were a creationist. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Once I'm glorified, okay, once I leave this earth, okay, and I'm in a perfected state, I'm no longer in the body, I'm in the presence of Christ, I'm made perfect, I'm going to be just like him. I'm going to think just like him. What's that?
Just like who?
Just like Christ.
Okay, I thought you meant just like Hitler, since he was a Christian creationist like you. So both of you have accepted Christ as your savior, so you're both going to be in heaven.
No, Hitler did not accept Christ as a savior.
Clearly, he did by all of his communications, both public and private.
Okay, and Jesus told the story in Matthew chapter 7 about many people who are going to say, "Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied?" Okay, so I don't care what.
Only 144,000 people get into. I get you. Yeah.
No, that's Jehovah's Witnesses.
I know, it's just as ridiculous. It's just the same. It's just a different denomination saying the same ridiculous thing.
But the reason I believe I will be in eternal bliss in heaven, even though I know that I have loved ones in hell that are suffering, is because I will be so perfected that I will rejoice in God's vindication. Finally.
Wow.
Yes.
So the defect, you have just celebrated the worst imaginable defect in humanity as a perfection. That's enormously disturbing to me.
No.
All right, Robert Campanaro, I'm out of time. And with this conversation and with that final statement, I honestly, I've been doing this series for a while where I want to talk to people about what they believe. And after this one, I don't think I want to do it anymore. I don't think there's any way to reach the humanity in the believer anymore. And I thank you for taking part. And I'm sorry that I talked so much. And I may not even air this unless you really, really want me to, because I don't think it's been very productive at all.
Well, I'm certainly going to air it. So if
okay, I'll give you the file. You're welcome to air it. I'm out.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yes. Please do send me the file.
I'll send it to you. It'll be a few hours because I have other things I have to attend to right away.
Sure. That's fine. All right, sir. Thank you very much.